My name is Celeste Harmon. I am 40 years old, and the moment I stopped being a granddaughter in my grandfather's eyes was the moment I asked him to give me what I had already earned. A week earlier, he had stood in a room full of shareholders, board members, and hotel executives, people I had briefed, impressed, and kept in line for over a decade, and announced that my cousin Rhett would be taking the open seat on the board of Harmon Crest Hotels. Not me, Rhett. A man who once left a $2 million renovation project unsigned for 3 months because he was yachting off the coast of Mykonos. I was standing in the hallway outside the Meridian Ballroom at our flagship property in Midtown Manhattan. In the same building, I had restructured from a mid-tier loss into our highest-grossing asset, listening to applause for a man who could not read a P&L statement without help. Then, my grandfather found me afterward, placed one hand on my shoulder, and said it like it was a kindness. "Celeste, you are too valuable where you are. The empire needs you behind the scenes." I smiled. "Of course, grandfather. Now I know exactly what your confidence in me looks like." He thought that was the end of it. He thought I would swallow it quietly, go back to my desk on the 34th floor of Harmon Tower, and keep doing what I had always done. What he did not know was that for 12 years, I had been the invisible architecture holding up the most celebrated hotel group on the East Coast. An architecture, when it decides to leave, does not go quietly. It takes the blueprints with it. Before I tell you exactly what happened next, what I did, and what it cost him, let me tell you who I was before I became the person he underestimated. My grandfather, Edmund Harmon, is 74 years old and one of the most recognizable names in American luxury hospitality. Harmon Crest Hotels operates 14 properties along the eastern seaboard, from a grand historic hotel in Miami's Brickell district to a converted Gilded Age mansion turned boutique resort in Newport, Rhode Island, to our crown jewel, the Harmon Crest Manhattan, 52 floors of marble, art, and impeccable service overlooking Central Park. On paper, it was Edmund's empire. In reality, it ran because someone had to manage the franchise licensing renewals, the health and safety compliance across 14 properties, the contract negotiations with luxury brand partners, the annual board reporting, the brand crisis responses, the vendor agreements, the labor compliance reviews, and the quiet, invisible work of making a billion-dollar portfolio look effortless from the outside. That someone was me. I had joined Harmon Crest at 28, fresh from a Cornell hotel administration degree in 3 years at a top hospitality consulting firm in Boston. Edmund had called me personally. "You're family," he said, "and you understand this world. Come build something with me." I believed him. I gave up a partnership track to come home. I told myself it was legacy. It was actually labor. By 30, I was the unofficial chief operating officer of a portfolio that had no official COO, because Edmund believed titles created ego, and ego created enemies. What he really believed, I would later understand, was that untitled people could be used without being compensated at the rate their work deserved. I oversaw revenue strategy across all 14 properties. I managed our relationships with 3 private equity partners. I rebuilt our Miami property's operational structure after a compliance failure nearly cost us our liquor licensing. I was the person every general manager called when something was about to go wrong and they needed it invisible before morning. Edmund liked to introduce me at dinners as my granddaughter, the sharp one. It sounded like pride. It was a price tag. My cousin Rhett Harmon was 36, the son of my father's brother and the permanent emergency of the family's second generation. Rhett had been given a VP title at 25, a corner office he rarely occupied, and enough rope to nearly hang the company 3 separate times. His first year, he approved a celebrity partnership deal without legal review that exposed us to a $4 million brand liability. His second, he greenlit a soft renovation at our Newport property using a contractor friend of his whose crew walked off the job mid-season.
His third, he made headlines for the wrong reasons at a hospitality conference in Miami, and I spent 48 hours doing quiet damage control so the story died before it reached the trades. Every time Rhett collapsed, Edmund called it growing pains. Every time I stabilized the fallout, Edmund called it family. My executive assistant, Diana Osai, had been with me for 7 years. She was meticulous, perceptive, and had what I can only describe as a finely tuned radar for institutional injustice. She watched everything. She said very little to others. But to me, after particularly sharp moments of erasure, she would set a fresh coffee on my desk and say simply, "I see it." That was enough for a long time. The board seat had been open for 8 months ever since Franklin Hess retired. Everyone in the company, including 3 independent board members who had told me directly, expected me to fill it. I had prepared for it. I had spent 18 months deepening our institutional investor relationships specifically to be ready for that seat. I had restructured our Miami assets financial reporting to demonstrate exactly the kind of governance discipline a board member needs. Then came the Meridian Ballroom, and Rhett's name where mine should have been. I did not cry that night. I went back to my apartment on the Upper West Side, poured a glass of wine I did not drink, and sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open in the city humming 40 floors below me. My grandfather's words kept replaying. "Too valuable where you are, behind the scenes." I had heard some version of this my entire career inside Harmon Crest. "You're the engine, Celeste. We couldn't do this without you, Celeste. What would we do without you, Celeste?" And yet, here was Rhett on the board with a title that matched the room he now occupied, while I remained the engine in a building with no nameplate on the door. I called Diana at 10 o'clock that night because I trusted her more than I trusted my own composure in that moment. She answered on the second ring. I told her what Edmund had said in the hallway. There was a pause, and then she said very quietly, "Celeste, you already know what this means." I did. I just needed someone else to say it. The next morning, I came into the office early and did something I had never done in 12 years. I took inventory, not of the hotels, of myself. Every operating system I had built, every vendor relationship in my name, every private equity contact I had cultivated personally, every franchise compliance protocol I had authored, every crisis I had resolved without credit, every labor plan restructuring, every brand partnership I had architected, while Rhett's name sat on the press release.
What I found did not surprise me. It clarified me. I was not just an employee of Harmon Crest Hotels. I was its institutional memory, its operational spine, its most valuable undocumented asset. If I disappeared quietly, they would not just lose a diligent executive, they would lose access to relationships, systems, and institutional knowledge that no org chart had ever captured, because Edmund preferred his most important person to remain invisible. That thought should have made me afraid to leave. Instead, it made me understand exactly what leaving would mean. Diana brought me coffee at 8:15 and sat across from my desk without being asked. "You're not just thinking about leaving," she said. It was not a question. "No," I said. "I'm thinking about what happens when I do." She nodded slowly. "The Miami Investor Review is in 6 weeks. The Newport licensing renewal is in 8. The Midtown Properties franchise audit, the one only you know the full history of, that's in 10. She paused. "And Rhett knows none of it." I looked at her. "No, he doesn't." We sat with that for a long moment. Then Diana said the thing that changed the frame entirely. "You've been protecting this empire like it was yours. Maybe it's time to let it be Edmund's." I did not storm out. I did not leak anything to the press. I did not sabotage a single relationship or filing or partnership. What I did was more devastating and more honest than any of that. I prepared the most comprehensive operational handoff document in the history of Harmon Crest Hotels.
14 properties, every compliance calendar, every vendor contact, every private equity relationship note, every pending negotiation, every crisis protocol. I organized it into a master binder so thorough that a competent stranger could have navigated the empire without me. Then I resigned. My letter to Edmund was 2 paragraphs. I thanked him for 12 years. I told him the handoff document was complete and Diana would oversee its transfer to the appropriate team. I told him I wished Harmon Crest continued success. I did not mention the board seat. I did not mention Rhett. I did not explain myself. Some truths do not require decoration. I sent it on a Thursday morning, along with a formal notice to our 3 private equity partners, our top 5 brand partners, and the independent board members I had relationships with, informing them of my departure and offering a brief transition call. Not accusatory, not dramatic, just professional, just the truth of my absence, delivered before Edmund could shape the narrative. By noon, Edmund had called 4 times. I let every call go to voicemail. By 2, Diana texted me from her own phone. The Miami PE contact just called the main line asking if the investor review is still on track. The front desk didn't know what to tell them. By 4, one of the independent board members had emailed Edmund directly, copying the board chair, asking for clarity on operational continuity given my departure. By 5, Rhett had apparently called Edmund in a panic because 3 general managers had reached out to him with operational questions he could not answer. Edmund's voicemail at 5:47 p.m. was the one I finally listened to twice. His voice had lost its boardroom polish. He sounded like a 74-year-old man realizing for the first time that the machinery beneath his empire had a name. "Celeste, I need you to call me. There are things in motion that require your attention. We can discuss the board situation. We can discuss everything. Please call me back." Please. He actually said please. My grandfather, who had not once said please to me in 18-hour days for 12 years, had finally found the word. It arrived about a decade too late. What happened next unfolded the way real consequences always do, not in one dramatic scene, but in accumulation. The Miami private equity review hit without me. Rhett attended. He could not answer 3 of the 7 core questions the partners raised about asset performance benchmarking. The meeting ended early. The partners requested a follow-up call with senior operational leadership. There was no senior operational leadership that knew those answers. Not anymore. The Newport licensing renewal hit 2 weeks later. The filing required historical compliance documentation going back 6 years. My handoff binder had all of it, but reading a binder and understanding it well enough to certify it under signature are different skills. Rhett signed something he should not have signed without counsel. Their attorney caught it. The filing was delayed. The resort's seasonal launch was pushed back 3 weeks, in Newport, in the height of the summer booking window. Edmund lost approximately $800,000 in reservation revenue from that delay alone. The Midtown franchise audit was the 3rd wave. The franchising agreement contained clauses I had negotiated personally that required specific operational reporting formats. Those formats existed because I had built them. The new team submitted the wrong templates. The franchise partner flagged a technical compliance breach. It was curable, but curing it required someone who understood the original negotiation. That someone was consulting for a competing hospitality group by the time they called. Because Diana had left too, 2 weeks after I did. She had been offered a director of operations role at a boutique firm, and she took it. When I asked if she was sure, she smiled and said, "I learned from the best, and the best just showed me that leaving is sometimes the most powerful thing a person can do." The trades eventually noticed. Hospitality industry publications ran quiet items about turbulence at Harmon Crest. A competitor's investor newsletter mentioned instability in their senior operational layer. Edmund, who had spent 40 years carefully managing the family brand's reputation, watched it develop hairline cracks in a matter of weeks, all because one person whose name had never appeared in a press release had stopped showing up. 6 weeks after my resignation, Edmund asked to meet me. Not at the office, at his home in Greenwich, Connecticut, the house I had attended every Harmon family Thanksgiving in since I was a child. I almost said no. Then I thought about what my therapist had told me the week before, that closure is not always about the other person changing. Sometimes it is simply about letting yourself be witnessed. I drove up on a Sunday morning. The house looked the same, Georgian colonial, perfectly maintained, the kind of home that communicates permanence. Edmund met me on the front steps, which surprised me. He had always made people come to him. He was smaller than I remembered, not physically, structurally, like the confidence he wore so naturally had been slightly adjusted. We sat in his study. He offered tea, which I accepted. For a long time, he looked out the window at the property's rear garden. Then he said, "I made a decision about Rhett that I told myself was about the business. I think I knew, even as I said it, it was about something else." I waited. He is a Harmon man in the way I understand Harmon men, and you were so capable that I think I stopped seeing you as someone who needed anything from me. I just kept assuming you would be there. There it was, the sentence I had deserved 12 years earlier.
I told him the truth, quietly, that I had given Harmon Crest the best of my professional life, that I had done it believing loyalty and competence were a language he spoke, that the board seat was not about ego, it was about being seen, finally, as something more than a mechanism. He nodded for a long time without speaking. Then he asked what it would take for me to return. I told him I would not be returning, not because I was punishing him, because I had spent 12 years making myself indispensable to someone else's empire. I was ready to build my own. He looked at me for a moment with an expression I had never seen on his face before, something between grief and respect. "You'll be formidable," he said finally. "You always were." "I know," I told him. "I just needed you to know it too." Rhett never acknowledged what happened. He sent one text 3 months later asking if I knew any good operations consultants the company could bring in. I read it twice, laughed until my eyes watered, and did not respond. Edmund, to his credit, did something I did not expect. He hired an actual chief operating officer, a seasoned hospitality executive from a competing group, at a salary and title that told the entire industry what the role had always been worth. Every dollar of that salary was a monument to what I had done for free under a title that did not exist. 18 months after I left, I opened the first property under my own brand. Harmon is not in the name. It does not need to be. The Celeste Collection launched with a single boutique hotel in Miami's Winewood district, 42 rooms, a rooftop restaurant helmed by a James Beard-nominated chef, and a design language that said nothing about legacy and everything about intention. We were fully booked for our first 4 months before we cut the ribbon. Diana is my chief of staff. She accepted before I had finished the sentence. Edmund attended the opening, uninvited but not unwelcome. He stood near the entrance for a long time, looking at the space. When he found me, he said only, "It is exactly what I would have expected from you." I thanked him. I meant it, because he had, at the end, given me the one thing that changed everything, not the board seat, the proof that waiting for his recognition would have been the longest detour of my life. My revenge was not that I left. It was not even that the empire stumbled without me. My revenge was that I stopped measuring my worth by a room I was never meant to enter and built my own room. The day our second property was announced, a converted historic inn in Charleston, South Carolina,
I sat in my new office in Miami, the one with my name on the door, and understood something I wish I had known at 28. The people who underestimate you most completely are often the same people who taught you everything you needed to outgrow them. So if you want the version of this story where Edmund weeps, Rhett transforms, and the family reconvenes in harmony, I cannot give you that. What I can give you is this. They finally learned what my presence was worth, and I finally learned that building for yourself, after years of building for others, is not abandonment. It is the most honest thing you can do with everything you know. Thank you for listening.